We continue our look into the phenomenon of Nigerian filmmaking with Nollywood filmmaker Obi Emerlonye.
Welcome to the Ministry of Motion Pictures podcast, where only the foolhardy and headstrong dare to venture. For within these humble halls you may find your heart stirred to join the ranks of a Christian film movement, to storm the world with God-glorifying media. But be forewarned, this undertaking will lead you down a perilous road of hardship and scorn. And so, if you're committed to pursue this life of woe, brave soul, I now leave you to your resolute guide, writer and director, Todd Schaefer.
Sometimes we need to shake up our perceptions of things that we believe are immovable. Things like the mechanisms of our Western film industry. We have to exercise our inner contrarian so that we can break free from the paralysis of the status quo. One way to do that is to look beyond our borders and observe what's happening in other cinematic cultures, and welcome the challenges that they present. These non-Western film industries can often demonstrate the health and power of our medium in ways we would never imagine. The Nigerian film industry is one such story. Our Nollywood series began with a filmmaker named Jamie Meltzer, who spent a summer in Lagos, Nigeria, filming a documentary on Nollywood. He gave us a Western outsider's view of what was happening when the Nigerian film industry was exploding. In our last episode, Dr. Elizabeth Olayiwola gave us her inside perspective on the history of the Nigerian film industry and shared with us how this industry was dominated by what they call evangelical film, which is heavily influenced by Pentecostalism. In this episode, my guest is a well-known Nigerian filmmaker named Obi Emelonye. Two of Obi's films have been on the top 10 list of the most watched Nigerian films of all time. Those films are Mirror Boy and Last Flight to Abuja. Obi has made 11 films and 2 television series, one of which is a Netflix original called Heart and Soul. Obi gives us a history of Nigerian cinema from a working, struggling filmmaker's perspective and shares the challenges he's faced in the past and new challenges that he faces today as he continues to make Nigerian films. And in the midst of his active production demands, Obi's recently taken a post as head of the filmmaking module at the University of Huddersfield in England. This is episode 54. Hey, Obi, how are you? Good to see you.
Hello, Todd. How are you?
So good to talk to you.
My pleasure.
Can you pronounce your last name for me? Is it Emelonye?
You see? Emelonye is correct.
Oh, good. I'm just now learning how to pronounce a lot of Nigerian names, so it's kind of fun.
No, I think a name is a name, and I think if people put some effort into calling any name, so long as it's written in the English alphabets, they can pronounce Schwarzenegger, for heaven's sake. Schwarzenegger is more difficult than Emelonye. Come on.
Not without a lot of practice. I'm sure the first times most people have tried they've butchered it. You're living in London?
Yes, I'm actually in Huddersfield now. Huddersfield is in the north of England. I'm a lecturer in filmmaking there. I come up here twice a week, to teach. I'm the head of module for the BA filmmaking at the university. So I am combining a bit of teaching to the practice of filmmaking. Yes,
that's great.
And I think I'm better for that. I'm better off for it.
Yeah. It makes you think about why you do what you do, and it gives you meaning. So,
and in trying to get, I was telling my students that there is a place where you are, where you can do something. Yeah. But you need to understand what you're doing so well to impart it to somebody else.
Yes.
So in the process of learning it better so that somebody else can learn from you.
Yes.
You learn more yourself. And I think I was literally headhunted in September to come and do this last year. And I think it's one of the best moves that I've made.
Wow.
Yes.
So you started in the fall season, and now your second semester?
Yes. So I started the PhD. I'm in the second year of my PhD, a 3-year full-time PhD that I started last year. Um, and out of the blues, I got contacted by the university to say they are looking for somebody who's, they're not looking for a professor of film who's going to pontificate and speak long essays about filmmaking without making. They need somebody who's in the field, but who is also making a lot of grounds academically. They don't need you to come straight out of secondary school and to have a school certificate as your qualification and be an expert at film. No, somebody who has managed to manage the two areas, academia and field practice. And they have struggled to find somebody like that. And I think I was the closest to that person. And they said, look, we want you and we'll make it possible. I said, I don't want to leave London. They said, commute. We'll only restrict your involvement with the course to 2 days and squeeze everything into those 2 days so that you can come from London for 2 days and go back to London. And that's what I've been doing since the fall.
Wow, that's incredible. That's a lot of fun, though, isn't it?
It is. I think you get to a certain age and, it stops being all about you.
Yeah.
And you think your life, your experience, your knowledge should be shared.
Yeah.
And the more you share it, the more fulfilled you are.
Yeah.
So it's not just about the dollar bills anymore. It's about how am I impacting somebody? How am I, motivating somebody or inspiring somebody to be a better, to take my experience, add to what they have already, which is better access to technology, a better creative mindset, a world where they can be their own promoters and take their content to the end of the earth. We didn't have that when we were starting. So they take my experience and add to that contemporary, what I call the contemporary advantage that they have. And boom, they would surpass everything that I've dreamt of doing. And that would give me great pleasure to see them do that.
That's great. I bet they love having you.
they pretend to love me. They pretend to love me.
Yeah, there's maybe a lot of pretending there. Who knows? They're students.
we are in the make-believe environment, so everybody is trying to practice make-believe.
Oh, that's great. Well, speaking of experience, you began your career doing Echoes of War. That was like one of your first films, right? And then you got into doing, Yeah,
I think my film history goes slightly beyond that.
Okay.
In 1999, I walked out of a master's in master's in script writing class, which I had started in 1999. I walked out and said I wasn't going to do this, stage, which is what I trained in originally, didn't have a future as far as what I would consider the work stroke remuneration balance. I don't think it has a lot to offer. So I said, you know what, the future is on the screen, whether it is a small screen or the large screen. I needed to have a training in that. And at the time, the film schools I applied to, and I was very ambitious with the ones I applied to, they didn't offer me a place. So I said, you know what, I'm going to take a longer route to this, a longer route, as you say in America, to this. Let me get my hands dirty. Let me learn from my mistakes. Let me jump into the deep end and sink or swim, whichever one comes my way. So I bought a camera, wrote a script based on the experience of my stage writing that I was doing before then, and gathered a few friends together and shot a film. I finished that and decided, you know what, I wasn't going to be a production assistant on a BBC project and work my way up that way. Let me go to Nigeria, where I would have the world as my oyster.
Yes.
And I packed up and went to Nigeria with a bit of equipment. And, that was in 2000 when the industry was beginning to take roots and was very frantic. They were producing like, there was no tomorrow. So I got into that mix, experienced it, got my fingers burnt with the kind of lack of ethics in terms of businesses in Nigeria.
Yeah.
And came back to London with, deep frustrations, and Echoes of War became my next film. So with the experience that I'd gathered in the UK, doing short courses and attending productions and observing what's going on, and the mixed with what I got in Nigeria in terms of real deep end field experience, I felt that I'd come of age, and I was in a very unique position to take the filmmaking experience of the UK and merge that with the madness and creative, what I call creative enigma of the Nollywood film industry, and see if we could get something that is unique. And I started doing Echoes of War, and the rest, they say, is history.
Yeah. So that was recognized by, now were you offered Mirror Boy, or is that that was something that you created?
So I like to quote the Bible, and only one verse in the Bible, which says that the kingdom of God suffereth violence, and violence taketh it by force. So,
yes.
so nothing is ever given.
That's so true.
Nothing is ever given. Nobody would call you and say, "Oh, you made that beautiful film. Come, let's give you another million to make another one." It doesn't happen. It's only in the fairy tales. So after Echoes of War, which got released in the cinemas in the UK, got released through mainstream DVD platform when DVD was the thing in 2004. So in a way, it broke new grounds, but what it did not do was make money, because we didn't have a marketing budget for this limited cinema release, and our people did not shop from HMV, Oxford Street, and Blockbusters on the high street. They bought from markets. So when it was released on DVDs, it still did not do very well on DVDs. So the idea became, okay, we can tell these stories on a certain scale. How do we now make these stories commercially viable? So I felt what we were missing in that mix was some kind of administrative acceptance of our project. So I felt if we go through the UK Film Council or the BFI with their stamp of authenticity, somebody might listen to us and watch the film and buy the film for more, and we can make that a more sustaining, self-sustaining industry. So I wrote The Mirror Boy first as a novel, and then I wrote it as a screenplay. And I approached the UK Film Council. They're defunct now. They're not in existence anymore. I approached them and said, look, I have this very dynamic project that I think would appeal to a broad spectrum of people, especially those that have children that are not, Irish or British in the white Caucasian sense, if you know what I mean.
Right. Yeah.
So anybody with a ethnic minority background would sympathize with this, because there is a strong identity crisis amongst young people growing up. Are we British, or are we just visiting? Are we British, or do we just have a red passport that says British on it? So I said that this is a story of adventure. It mixes the streets of London with the jungles of Africa. It's perfect for bringing up this very suppressed aspect of storytelling in terms of the mainstream, the ethnic which is storytelling, especially the ones from Africa.
Yeah.
And the person I spoke to originally was very excited about it. He read the synopsis and he felt, I think there's something here.
Mm-hmm.
They now read the script and he was, I would say to a good level convinced about the quality of the project and its viability. And he referred me to a producer, one young boy who I'm not sure how old he was at the time, who didn't have a proper understanding of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Anything have drugs and gun violence and stabbings in it concerning Black people did not make sense to him. So he didn't get it.
Mm-hmm.
And he literally told me, sorry, I don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
So they now passed me from one producer to the other. I said, oh, they're going to think about giving me a, what do they call it? A development fund.
Yeah.
And as they were considering it, I ran into a guy who ran a TV station called OHTV at the time. They're defunct by, and his name is Akin Salami. And I told him, look, this is the project I have. It's very interesting. He bought into it. And, as fate would have it, he committed the 50,000, I think it was 45,000 pounds that we made the film with. And that was made possible by the fact that we got a lot of logistical support from the Gambian government where we shot. So that's how it came about. So I now pulled it from the UK Film Council, went ahead and made the film, and it kind of went from one humble project to a reasonable film festival in the world and won a lot of local awards in Nigeria, in Africa. And, essentially put me on a pedestal that made me this person that I am today.
Yeah. Even though you're in London, your heart seems to be in Africa with kind of films that you write.
I cannot be more American than Americans, if you know what I mean. But there are very few people that can be as African as I am.
That's true. That's very true.
So I think every creative person works from what is called in English their substratum, which is their base, their roots.
Yeah. Because
I can lend a certain authenticity to any story that I tell, where I can see the characters, I can feel the characters. I have models and references for those characters. I have the deep spiritual, physical, physiological, psychological understanding of those characters. And I think I made a very conscious decision to say, look, I'm British by assimilation, but I am African. And I spent the first 26 years of my life, which up until recently was exact half of my life. But I spent the first 26 years of my life in Nigeria, and I have a grounding in a certain Africanness. So, and then having spent the next 28 years of my life in the UK, I have now contextualized a little bit that my Africanness. So it has taken the edge of its roughness and assumed what I consider to be a unique cosmopolitan worldview, whereby I see things both from the African perspective and from the perspective that is more palatable to the rest of the world, which is why my films have a way of connecting with people who are not necessarily Africans. Even though it hasn't lost the local connection, it can still cross borders. And Netflix in December did a top 10 of all releases from Netflix Niger, which is the Nigerian version of Netflix. And they looked at the most watched films that they have released. And they have some originals, some big promos for those originals in that mix. Yeah. But I have two films in the top 10 of all most watched Nigerian projects on Netflix ever. The Mirror Boy at number 7 and Last Flight Abuja at number 4. And they were made 10 years ago and 11 years ago, respectively. So I think it is that hybrid personality and identity that I've kind of formed from a very strong African background, but also influenced by my 28 years in the West.
Yeah.
That I am still an African, but I am a very what's the word? I am an African that has the ability of reaching into the rest of the world and touching their heart.
Yes. Yeah, you're in a unique place. But there is a relationship between Nigeria and Africa where there seems to be a lot of filmmakers who come from Britain and work between the two. Is that am I characterizing that well?
First of all, we don't have a formal relationship in terms of treaties or agreements between the UK and Nigeria. No. So whatever you find, which would be something that, an independent person like myself would have engendered, would have been, strictly speaking, a business arrangement, just like they did with Half of a Yellow Sun when it was made. It was made with Nigerian money, but they brought British talent to come and give it some weight.
Right.
Unfortunately, that did not work. So that wasn't replicated going forward. But, the British are essentially our colonial masters, and our relationship with them, even though it's not really artistic in terms of film, has been strong. And I think because people like myself have come from here back to Nigeria to help add something to, some kind of innovation and technological advancement to the filmmaking machinery in Nigeria, maybe that might underline a certain relationship, but I don't think there's a formal one. And I don't think they will take credit for anything that we've achieved in Nigeria, because it was all done by self-help, by failing and learning and getting better with time and honing our skills and becoming, I would say America has more influence over the Nollywood film industry, because a lot more Nollywood filmmakers were trained in New York and LA than the ones that are trained in London. So
I didn't know that. So my podcast comes from the place of filmmakers, filmmakers talking to filmmakers, and I'm still trying to educate myself on the Nollywood industry, because it's somewhat, I know a little bit more about it now because I spent a lot of time watching films and reading up and interviewing folks like you. But I'm still trying to get a grasp around what characterizes Nollywood and what has allowed it and Nigerian filmmakers to be prolific, to be able to write films that appeal to their audience, that's relatable, and to be able to just get out there and do stuff without having all of the hurdles in terms of, the mental hurdles, like I'm not ready yet, or I don't have this or that, or I don't have the big budget. I've got a story to tell. How can I go do it? And I think that's something that I think American filmmakers need to hear, because we are sort of restricted. We do have these barriers to
inhibitions.
Inhibition.
Yes. Inhibitions. Yes, I think the very history of Nollywood is the reason it is the way it is. It is the reason it has this very abrasive, confrontational aesthetics. It is the reason it has this very unusual, unofficial business structure. It is the reason it has long legs to travel across the whole of Africa, and in some kind of way conquer, colonize in terms of media the rest of Africa, at least for a little while, before everybody else now recovers and says, "What? Let's start ours. Let's match what they're doing." So let me take you through that a little bit in a short form. So the Nigerian film industry started in the early 70s, with the establishment of the Nigerian Film Corporation and government spending a lot of money in the Festival of Arts in 1977. there was a hunger for telling Nigerian stories using film. A few of the filmmakers trained in Paris came back to Nigeria, and they were making films. And that the films they were making kind of evolved using, so there was a Yoruba, a kind of a tribal traveling theater of performers who went from city to city performing their plays, which was usually slapstick comedies with a lot of dance and a lot of music. So when the practitioners of this theater felt that they had reached a certain level, one of them called Hubert Ogunde now felt that it was costing him very much to put together a train of actors and put them in hostels and transport them from one city to the other. And it was a real operation that with the emergence of film, what if he took the same project that he did, but performed it only once and had it on film? And instead of performing in every city he goes to, he shows the film that is already made. That would reduce his entourage, reduce his cost, increase his efficiency, and increase his profits. To cut it a long story short, he started doing that. And the Yoruba traveling theater film industry was born. A lot of people who were working in the same industry started doing the same. At first, they hired experienced directors trained in France, but after a while, they felt they understood the shot calling business and started directing themselves. So that flourished for a little while between the early 70s and the early 80s, when due to the global recession that was happening at the time, the price of oil plummeted and Nigeria was thrown into all sorts of crises. And one of the effects of those crises was the dollar to naira exchange rate, which skyrocketed. Because at that time, what they were doing was make the film and bring the negatives to London for development.
Right.
That became way too expensive to do. People could not leave their homes anymore to go watch in the evenings those shows because of insecurity. And, they stayed indoors. And just like Netflix flourished during the lockdown, keeping people indoors, they're looking for something, entertainment that is close to home. And the TV became that entertainment. So Nigerians now embraced a lot of TV watching. A lot of the soap operas that were running on television were, very, very popular and made loads of stars out of the performers in those shows. And in this crisis, when the Yoruba traveling theater was on the decline because of all these social and economic factors, at the same time, this young man who used to be a producer with the Nigerian Television Authority making those soaps, all of a sudden NTA dismissed a lot of the actors and canceled some of the shows because of funds. So the actors were unemployed. This young man felt, if we... So at that time also, there were people selling, this young man was selling pirated American films and Indian films and Chinese films. And people were buying those DVDs, pirated VHS tapes from him. So he felt he had a bunch of tapes that he had wiped clean because people were not connecting with the Chinese films anymore. They stopped buying them. And he had a warehouse full of tapes that he didn't know what to do with. So he said, why don't we call these guys they are popular, that have just been sacked by the NTA, and put them in a TV series or film, so-called film, because that's what it was called at the time, but I don't think it had enough merit to be called film. And that's it. He put them together, wrote a script called Living in Bondage, and copied them onto those VHS tapes, and they the shelves.
Wow.
In a matter of weeks, they sold in millions. So the people who were also pirates in the same line of work as him, his name is Ken Nebwe. The people in the same line of work as him felt, wow, if he could do it, I know him, then I could. I have a cousin who's just finished secondary school. They can write a script. Come, write a script. Here, put it together. And they replicated that. And they too were selling.
Wow.
So it became a business before it became an art.
Yeah.
That is the problem of Nollywood. So the quality came last. It was a case of... So
that's a good problem to have, I guess.
It's a good problem to have. It's a good problem. They sourced distribution before they thought about, our quality is shit.
Yeah.
Can we improve it?
Yeah.
So everybody in that line of work, the pirates became the first producers of Nollywood film industry. They started churning out films every week.
Yeah.
Every week. They were really, really prolific. And they were flying off the shelves. The VHS era came and went. It was VCD and DVD, and people were buying them. You know, every household had a VHS player or a DVD player, and every night they sat around the TV to watch one or two films. And they could, for the first time, they could see themselves and their neighbors and people that look like them in a film. And that was the transnational impetus for Nollywood, because Nigerians that live in Congo, Nigerians that live in South Africa, come home, they buy those DVDs and they take them to South Africa. And all of a sudden, South Africans have never seen a Black person in a film. Yeah. Playing a role that they recognize, apart from being a houseboy and stuff like that. Yeah. So it kind of liberated, empowered Black person on the screen as the lead, as the star. They had not seen it before. So they were ideologically attracted to this new phenomenon coming from Nollywood. And for that reason, they actually overlooked the technical difficulties of the production and said, I recognize this man. There's a chief in my village that behaves exactly like this man. and that was the buy-in. So they started requesting those DVDs themselves, and Nollywood moved transnational. Yeah. And to add to the mix, a company called Africa Magic, Mnet, a South African company, decided to open a 24-hour satellite channel showing only Nigerian films that had presence in at least 40 African countries. Wow. So people no longer needed to wait for their friends to bring them tapes from Nigeria. Wow. They just flick a channel on TV, show me Nollywood, and they would sit and indulge themselves to their heart's content with Nollywood content. That's so fun. And that is how the bedding, the rooting of Nollywood transnationally happened. In the UK, in America, people would come, and now then websites started springing up. Iroko TV was one of the first to do that and showing African content. And before you know it, it's everywhere. But just like everything, it had to get to a crisis position with overproduction, with lack of quality, with very unstructured business ecosystem. It ground almost literally to a halt. Really? For it to kind of reinvent itself into the industry that we have right now that I'm part of. Okay. So that happened when it ground to the halt, when was that about? So it's a period of a few years between 2000 and I would say 2005 to 2009. That was when the interest in the industry kind of lulled to the level of almost, being completely indifferent, people being indifferent to it because they'd had enough. There was a recycling of stories. There was a truncation of simple stories into 1,000 parts. A film that would have been one feature film, they'll cut it into 5 and just sell it as 5 new DVDs. So a little bit of that, a little bit of, you expected a little bit of advancement to have happened in the years that the industry has been around, but it continued to be the same linear, same linear storytelling, the same bad quality acting, the same histrionics, the same melodramas, the same domestic issues. A young boy is maltreated by his uncle. He goes to Lagos, makes money, comes back, and returns the favor. It's usually the stereotypical formula, and people got tired. They wanted more.
Yeah. Well, every film industry has gone through that. So I think that's part of the growing pains of a healthy film industry, is to go through periods like that.
Yes.
I think we're.
And like I said, he gave birth to the cinemas.
Yeah.
And from the cinemas emerged a new wave of higher quality, more attention to detail productions that are now on Netflix. We still have a long way to go to be, a veritable film industry.
Yeah.
But in terms of, the difference between what it was in the late 1990s when the boom was at its highest and what it is now in terms of quality, it's like chalk and cheese.
Yeah, it really is. But that's you have to make films in order to get good at films generally, right? So that's the benefit that you enjoyed in Nollywood, was just the amount of films you could go out and you could do not one film, then do the next one, do better, and you're learning. So there's something to be said for watching films widely and learning from watching other films, but you have to put that in practice, or it doesn't really get under your skin and become part of your language until you do it. So that's the beauty of it.
They say what you learn from one project, shooting one project, you can't learn in film school.
No.
I think that ability to have an expression of that talent, no matter the level that you're starting from, the more you do it, the better you get at it. And that's what happened with Hollywood. People got experienced and, got a bit wily and wiser with the production cycle and how things work. And without formal training, they could almost call themselves professionals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What a joy to be in that movement at that time, and even in the second movement, because I think in the 2009 Nollywood ranked number 2 in output. So as you came out of that, that grinding to a halt, it suddenly shot back up.
Yeah, we're still high up in terms of the volume.
Yeah,
at the moment. The quantity is good, the quality is coming up. Yeah. And I think in the next few years, when there is I'm not so optimistic anymore, because the economic situation in Nigeria is dire. But the expectation was that in the next few years, when a lot of these knowledge that people have acquired and experience have acquired have really bedded in, that the quality of the projects would be anything you can find anywhere. And I think one other thing that Nollywood managed to do, which is not given a lot of credit for, is the videoization of cinema.
Yeah.
Because up until Nollywood came on, if you didn't, just like American filmmakers, if they can afford a Kodak celluloid camera, they're not thinking of film.
Yeah.
But, before George Lucas did it with Star Wars,
yes,
Nollywood were shooting feature films with video cameras.
That is a great point.
All of a sudden, people now shoot on Reds and Arri Alexas and HDMI. I mean, HMI. What do you call them? The small cameras.
The DSLRs and
DSLR cameras.
Yeah.
People are shooting that and releasing that on big platforms.
Yeah.
No, it was Nollywood that started it.
Yes, it's so true. You guys were the revolutionaries when it came to digital.
We were. Sony actually should name one of their cameras by Nollywood. Call it Sony Lagos, because we started buying so much Sony. Yes, that were meant for TV. That was meant for low projects. We converted them into cinema cameras and kind of literally forced the world to accept the story,
Yeah.
and just to accept the message and not the messenger.
Yeah, that's true. I can tell you from watching Nollywood films myself, I find them refreshing because, we're growing, at least me being in the West, I've grown up on Hollywood. I've been watching lots of Hollywood films, and there's sort of an ethos around what they should be. And there's lots of story gurus saying, here's how you do your stories and all that. That it sort of disengages the sense of relatability often, because we're too busy trying to figure out what's the next high concept, what's the next fantasy figure. But Nollywood, that your films tend to be more grounded in reality and the dramas of everyday life, and they're more relatable and they're human. And I find that much more appealing, in spite of some of the artistic flaws or production value. I find them a lot more refreshing to watch than a lot of Hollywood films. So
I think not Hollywood, as they say, has lost its soul.
Yes, that's so true.
It's been scrambling all over the world looking for inspiration to get started again. At the moment, there was a time when Hong Kong cinema was the inspiration, and they brought people like Jet Li and what's his name, the one in Rush Hour, what's his name,
Work on Why, and
that loves to do stunts. What's his name?
Oh yeah,
Jackie Chan.
Jackie Chan, yes.
Jackie Chan, yes. So they brought them over, and they took inspiration from the fast-paced action sequences of Hong Kong cinema. And right now, they are facing towards South Korea. The South Korean projects, in spite of being, I would say, completely different from Hollywood in terms of the storytelling technique and the narrative style. I just watched the BAFTAs last weekend, and a South Korean film won, and that they've been winning for the last few years. Starting with what's it called?
Parasite.
And then this one that took the world by storm on Netflix, the series. All of a sudden, something that in the last few years would have been almost impossible to be a global phenomenon has become global phenomenons, because people are just looking for something else from somewhere. And I think in this merry-go-round of seeking inspiration from somewhere, from the corners of the world, Nigeria's turn would come when Hollywood would say, these people that are churning out these stories every day, and people are still watching them, there must be something about these stories. Maybe we should for the next inspiration. Mm-hmm. And when that I'll become a billionaire, and I will buy you a
I'll mark that down.
Oh God.
Do you think that, I know that Netflix has been moving into Nigerian film, and you in fact have a series on it, Heart and Soul. Do you think Netflix and some of these other companies that are coming in, is that going to be a good thing? I think there's a good part, with the financing, the distribution, the visibility, but I wonder if there's a negative part where it's imposing that you do certain kind of stories, and maybe it's going to cause you to lose your soul as a Nigerian filmmaker.
I think you have really analyzed it very perfectly. Let me start with the positives. So the emergence of Netflix, and not just Netflix Global, Netflix Niger, a dedicated segment of that global company to Nigeria, is a huge positive in terms of turning the searchlight towards what we're doing, giving us access to the rest of the world in terms of, people watch my films in China and write me messages, and watch my films in Brazil and write me messages. I couldn't have reached those people if it wasn't for Netflix. Unfortunately, I would say it hasn't worked out as people would have thought that the economic value of our films would rise. Netflix, according to them, work on algorithms which tell them that based on certain level of subscription from that geographical zone, not taking into account Nigerians living in the US or in the UK or people working from all over the world. They're looking at the levels of subscription from that geographical enclave called Nigeria. And if that doesn't meet a certain criteria for them, they would value the projects as abysmally as they're doing right now. So one would have expected that with such visibility globally, that the valuation of our projects would increase and people like myself would become, I wouldn't say rich, but at least self-sustaining. But that's not the case. Very, very far from the case. The valuation is still very poor, and they blame the internet connectivity and the cost of it in a part of the world with very serious infrastructural challenges. So the money part hasn't worked out. So in a way, it's an unfulfilled promise almost. But I think that is the least of the worries of people like me and people that actually love this industry and its independent identity that it has emerged from. So Nollywood came up as an industry where the people of Nigeria had agency for the production, distribution, monetization, and promotion of their projects. That is the uniqueness of Nigerian cinema across all African countries, because the South Africans could make slightly better quality films, but they could not control the factors of distribution. Kenyans make sometimes very good films, but they still have to rely on, Lebanese distributors to get it in the cinemas. Nigerians were the only African country where the filmmakers who were natives had control over the factors of production, distribution, and monetization. And that is why it rose to this kind of global prominence as it did, because it didn't have any, somebody who's paying the piper dictating the tune. But with the emergence of Netflix, particularly in the COVID era, when cinemas that provided some kind of alternative to those platforms were logistically disabled, what now happened was that Netflix or some of these streaming platforms became what I would call the usurpation of that distribution independence that made Nollywood not good. So without them dictating really, make this kind of films, if they are taking those kind of films and putting them on their platforms, they are indirectly controlling the editorial power of the filmmakers. So an industry that prided itself in its independence, in its self-sustaining, self-marketing criteria, has all of a sudden woken up after the pandemic. And Netflix and such like platforms like Amazon that is about to come have become the benchmark, gold standard. They've become the stamp of authenticity, which we didn't need before, because whatever film you made, but right now you have to make a Netflix film, in quote, to find an audience for it on Netflix. I would say that I'm one of the lucky few. I have 5 projects on Netflix, so I have benefited from that system, maybe because of the kind of films I was making originally. But there are people who have essentially been completely disenfranchised by the sheer presence and the sheer global scale and global influence of Netflix to be able to dictate directly or indirectly the editorial content of Nigerian projects. And that would be a huge loss.
Yeah.
So there are people who are fighting. In fact, as part of my PhD, I'm doing a research on that kind of disputed identity about Nollywood being a cinema and also where it's headed now that the thing that made it Nollywood, which is self-distribution and self-monetization, has been, it hasn't been violently taken from it.
Yeah.
But somehow it has lost that ability to be a self-sustaining industry. And all the things that he achieved as a film industry were based on that independence.
Yeah.
What is left if you take away that independence?
Right.
Only the future will tell.
Oh, that's so sad. I mean, I think the same struggle, we have the same struggle in Canada and the United States, where the independent filmmakers don't really get the valuation of what they produce and the distributors take it all. And that's always a struggle. There's like a top 10 or 5% who actually make a lot of money at it, but everybody else is struggling to make ends meet. And they're the ones pouring out the blood, sweat, and tears on the project, only to see it, get buried by Netflix or Amazon in their massive catalogs. And sometimes nobody ever really sees them, because how do you know about them? How does anybody know about a film on Netflix if it's not coming up?
They select the ones that they want to promote.
Yeah.
And they'll tell you that the ones that they have IP in, intellectual property, they will promote. And the rest, people have to discover them by themselves.
Yeah, that's right.
Filmmakers like myself have to use this ubiquitous free thing called social media to draw attention to the project, to post, and somebody likes it and says something, and somebody reposts it, and somebody goes and watches it. Before you know it, like the last film that I wrote, which came on Netflix last year, it was simply word of mouth. It ended up becoming number one in Nigeria for a few weeks, based on simply people watching it and saying, "Oh, I just watched a film on Netflix. Thank God for that." And somebody will now go and watch it based on that recommendation. But unfortunately,
was that Badamasi?
No, Badamasi is coming on Amazon.
Okay, so it's the oratory.
Netflix. No, it's Gone. I didn't direct it. I only wrote it.
Oh, okay.
It's called Gone, as in Gone. Gone.
Got it.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah. So it did quite well. I was supposed to direct it, and then the production didn't happen, and I moved on to other things, and then somebody else shot the script that I wrote.
Okay.
So yeah. So it didn't have any publicity behind it, just word of mouth. And it has done very well. So I think even though we are on those platforms where, we have access to the world, we as filmmakers would need to still continue to promote our films as if it's going in the cinemas, as if we're looking for bums on seats and eyes on the screen. And so that people will watch it, because the more successful it is on that platform, the more they're likely to take more projects from you, or even commission remakes or sequels or prequels, as the case may be.
That's true. I wonder if filmmaking is moving towards sort of like what's happening with the publishing industry, where self-publishers are coming in and they're basically abandoning the mass publishing world to do things on their own, and they're actually making more money. I'm just wondering if there's a way that we can learn from what they're doing.
We have learned already from what they're doing. And even though it's not everybody's cup of tea, because it's definitely not my cup of tea, there are certain platforms that provide the opportunity for self-publicity, self-publication, as the case may be. YouTube started it, and kind of got lost in whether he wanted to be a TV station or he wanted to be streaming on demand platforms. And then platforms like TikTok came up, and even though they have a reduced timing for content, made it possible for people to post things, little clips about them that could literally go viral overnight. And then they found a way of monetizing it. So in a way, that revolution has already started, whereby people, the cinema has been threatened a few times, and somebody will be silly to write it off, that it's not going to survive this, recent onslaught. But, the cinema is threatened by not just the TV at home as it was before, but the mobile phones, the pads, the laptops. They are the competition with the cinema now. And the more the cinema, and they don't really help themselves with the way they are pricing their tickets, to be honest.
Yes.
You would think that somebody who's, endangered would make modest amendments to their pricing structure, make themselves easier for people to get to. But they keep increasing the price. So instead of going to the cinema and watching one film, you can use the same money to subscribe to Amazon and Netflix and watch 1,000 films to your heart's content.
Yeah, that's right.
And the value proposition is like, clear for everybody to see. Yeah. So the cinema has survived a lot of onslaughts from, when it first emerged in 1914. And I would be stupid to write it off. But I think what's going on right now is a huge threat to its supremacy as the platform for watching content, because that is moving to more personal, more intimate, more private structures like mobile phones, laptops, and TV screens at home. Digital, intelligent, smart TVs that could do everything. Yeah.
Wow. So what's in store in the future for Obi?
Unfortunately, this industry is a continuum. Yeah, you cannot say I've arrived, because there is no arriving. Because each time you get to a stop, there are a few more stops ahead of you that you have to strive towards. So we are constantly reimagining ourselves and trying to take what we do in the light of very swift technological changes to continue to be relevant. I signed with CAA in January. They represent me now.
Good for you.
It looks good on my CV, but I haven't got a lot to show for it yet. We are working on a few things.
It'll come.
Yeah, we're working on a few things. So I have a few projects, one in post-production right now that I just shot in Nigeria. I've continued to practice my belief that you have to be local before you can be global. So I'm rooting my stories in Africa and hoping that somebody would connect with it. If Black Panther could do what it did, then there's hope for the rest of us.
Yes, for sure.
So I have a few projects in the offing. Two in pre-production, hopefully in collaboration with some big studios in America that would provide some extra lift, and one already in post-production that we shot late last year. The idea is to grow that sector, that industry where we tell what I call quintessential African stories with universal soul.
Yes, so that's great.
Where you find them, you can engage with them, you can learn from them, you can be touched by them, you can enjoy them. And we'll continue to do that till we can't do that anymore. At the moment, like I said at the beginning, I have taken up responsibility as the head of module and lecturer in filmmaking at the University of Huddersfield in Northern England. And that has, added more ammunition to my profile to be able to make a case for a veritable, strong African film industry. Because, when I accepted this job, I knew it was more than just me that was being recognized. It was almost a validation of the Nollywood school of thought in filmmaking, that one of their own is now a lecturer in filmmaking, not film studies, in the actual art of making films. So it's a huge acceptance, not just for me, but for the entire industry. And may more of my people come into this and to preach the gospel according to Nollywood and to get the world to understand that you don't need $1 billion to tell a story, that you can believe in yourself and rise above that initial, self-doubt and inertia that you experience when you want to go out and do something, and go with what Obama calls "yes, we can" attitude.
Yes. And you Nollywood is known for that. Yes, we can. And we're going to do it. That's what I admire about you guys so much. What's the name of your film that's just out? I mean, it's just in production.
So, Badamasi is coming out on Amazon. We've just signed the deal last month. Yes, it's coming out on Amazon. Amazon Niger, that is launching next month. Yes. Blackmail is in line to be released by Netflix, which is the next film that I made. The Oratory is a Catholic church film, so it doesn't have the scope for such, but it's doing the rounds. It's been doing a lot of premieres across the world, and some people are taking them to secondary schools in Nigeria and across Africa to reach the young people and inspire them. The one I'm working on right now is called Lucky Joe. It's a comedy that I made in collaboration with Blue Pictures, and a guy called Emmanuel Ofia, who's a collaborator going forward. And between the three of us, we have a few projects, bigger projects in the pipeline that we'll speak about very soon.
Beautiful. You've got a great heritage there and a great story. And Obi, I wish you the best with your efforts. It's a battle on the set, and then it's a battle off the set. It can be wearisome, but hopefully you'll get some good recognition there and
thank you, Todd.
More validation for what you're doing. And,
thank you, Todd.
Thank you so much for being on the show. This has been a pleasure. Obi.
My pleasure, Todd.
Obi,
God bless you.
Take care. God bless you too. In our show notes, you'll find more information about Obi's films and a link to Huddersfield University. And if you haven't done so, I encourage you to sign up for our newsletter and follow us on Facebook, because coming this spring and summer, we're going to launch a new effort that you're not going to want to miss. Being part of the newsletter or Facebook page will help keep you up to date.
Our time together draws to a close, valiant filmmaker. We trust your heart has been warmed and your soul nourished. Your host has been Todd Schaefer, creative director of the faith-based independent production house Glorious Films and animation director at Tonic DNA, where he toils on productions for the major Hollywood establishment. If you wish to support the work of the ministry, or simply buy your overworked host a fancy $5 coffee to keep him warm and caffeinated as he pecks out his next script, you can do so on our website at ministryofmotionpictures.org. Again, that's ministryofmotionpictures.org. And you can help spread the word by feeding the algorithms when you share, like, link, follow, subscribe, or leave a nasty comment on our social media. Until we see you again, I adjure you, in the name of our Lord, go forth and boldly create film.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.